We all moved into the same house this January. Me, my younger sister, my dad, Angie, and her 3 kids. A full house, full of people, full of noise. My dad's in his 40s, Angie too. They started dating 2 years ago. I remember because it was the first time since my mom passed away that he brought someone around and said it was serious. At first, it was just weekend visits. Then she started staying over. And now we live together. When people talk about blended families, they make it sound simple. Like you move in, share some meals, and boom, instant family. But it doesn't work like that. At least not for me. I've got my routines, my history, my own grief. Angie's got 3 kids, 2 boys, 1 girl. One of her sons is almost an adult, the other's around my age. Her daughter's still a kid, around 10. So now there are 6 of us kids under one roof. And 2 adults trying to play house like it's already working. Since the beginning, I've seen Angie for who she is, my dad's girlfriend, and now his fiancée. That's all. Not my stepmom, not my parent. Just the woman he chose to move on with. And honestly, I didn't think that would be a problem. I was respectful, I wasn't causing drama, I didn't talk back or make scenes. I just didn't call her stepmom, because she isn't one. Not to me. But apparently, that quiet line I drew, the one I thought nobody would notice or care about, that's where everything started to crack. The way I see it, I've already lost one parent. My mom passed 5 years ago, and that hole doesn't get filled just because someone else walks into our lives. Angie isn't some magical replacement, and I never asked for her to be one. I've never been disrespectful. I've just been honest. If I need permission, I go to my dad. If I have a question about my future, I talk to him, not her. She's not the one I turn to, and I've made peace with that. But I guess she hasn't. It all really blew up one evening when my dad and Angie called one of those classic, uncomfortable family meetings. You know the type. No warning, just a tense, everyone to the living room now command. I walked in already bracing myself because when adults use that tone, it's never about something good. All 6 of us kids crammed together on the couch, awkward and silent. Dad stood off to the side, arms folded. Angie stood next to him like some co-captain of a sinking ship, lips pursed, ready to lead the charge. They launched into a speech, like they'd been rehearsing it, talking about unity, blended family, and how we weren't acting like we were part of a real household. The main point? None of us were using terms like stepmom or stepdad. Apparently, we were all too stuck in our own little silos, still seeing things as dad and his kids versus Angie and hers. And they didn't like that. Not one bit. Then they turned to Angie's oldest. The guy's almost a full adult, and she laid it out like it was an assignment. Told him that starting now, he had a stepdad. That he needed to put in effort to build a father-son bond with my dad. Ask him for advice. Learn from him. Treat him like family. His response? Brutal. He laughed right in her face. Not a small, awkward chuckle. No, a sharp, nasty laugh. Then he told her to buzz off. Said my dad was just the loser she sleeps with. That's all he'd ever be. And here's the part that really got me. Angie didn't react. My dad didn't flinch either. They just let it pass. No yelling, no correction, no, you can't speak like that. They absorbed the insult like it was nothing. And then, somehow, they made me the center of the issue. They turned to me next. My dad tried to soften the blow. He was clearly uncomfortable, choosing his words carefully. Said he just wanted me to try harder. Be more open. Show Angie a little more trust. But before he could even finish, Angie cut him off. Her voice was sharp and certain, like she'd been waiting for this moment. She said I needed to start calling her stepmom. That I had 2 parents again, and it wasn't healthy or fair that I only leaned on my dad. that the family dynamic would never work if I didn't respect her the same way. And then she looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'm here to be your mother now." I couldn't help it. I laughed, not to be cruel, not to mock her, but because the whole thing felt absurd, like a badly written scene from a TV show where the characters forget what reality feels like. The moment the laugh left my mouth, the temperature in the room dropped. I didn't say a word, just leaned back a little, arms folded, and let the silence stretch. Angie's face tightened like I'd slapped her. Dad looked more confused than angry, like he wasn't sure if I'd just insulted her or lost my mind. And then, it exploded. "It's disrespectful to laugh at us like that," Angie snapped. "This is a serious conversation, and you're treating it like a joke." Dad jumped in, echoing her words, talking about how this was important, how I was ruining everything by not taking it seriously. But they didn't seem to care what I'd actually said. Not one word. All they cared about was the laugh, the reaction. So I sat up and said it plainly. "She's not my mom. She's your fiancée, soon-to-be wife. I respect that. I'll treat her like someone important in your life. But she's not my parent, and I'm not going to pretend she is. If she doesn't like that, she can leave." Yeah, I said that. The words came out firm, calm, honest. They didn't hear it. Not really. All they focused on was that I'd laughed and humiliated them in some imaginary way. Dad told me I owed Angie an apology. Angie said I needed to fix my attitude and accept the fact that she was going to be my parent, whether I liked it or not. And all I could think was, how is this real? I didn't cuss anyone out. I didn't make it personal. I just told the truth. Meanwhile, her son had called my dad a loser she rides in front of everyone, and no one blinked. No consequences, no drama, just silence. But me? I laugh, and suddenly I'm the problem child. So I told them straight up that if this was how things were going to be, I'd keep my head down until I turned 18. Then I'd be out. Done. They called me dramatic. I told them I was just being careful. Because in this house, apparently, you can say whatever you want, as long as you're not laughing. After that night, the atmosphere at home shifted. Everything got quieter and colder. Angie kept her distance, which I was more than fine with. My dad started acting like he was walking on eggshells around me, asking fewer questions, barely making eye contact during dinner. And her kids? They followed their mom's lead. Silent glances, passive-aggressive sighs, doors that suddenly needed slamming. But you know what? I could live with that. I'd already made peace with not being part of some perfect blended family. I didn't need fake movie night bonding or awkward Sunday brunches. I wasn't asking for hugs or handwritten chore charts. I just wanted honesty and space and the decency to not be forced into some role I didn't choose. What made it worse, though, was how performative everything became. Angie started calling me her bonus son in front of neighbors. At dinner, she'd say things like, "Can you pass the salad, sweetheart?" with this exaggerated warmth like we were actors in a sitcom. It wasn't for me. It was for show. And it made my skin crawl. She wanted the illusion of family more than the reality. The title of stepmom meant more to her than the actual relationship. Meanwhile, her son, the same guy who called my dad trash, kept making snide comments under his breath, mocking how I dressed, rolling his eyes when I spoke. Once, he even laughed when I dropped my phone and said, "Clumsy just like your pathetic dad." I stared at him for a long second, not saying a word, because I already knew how it would play out. If I snapped, I'd be the violent one. If I answered back, I'd be disrespectful. If I even sighed too loud, I'd be ruining the family dynamic. So I swallowed it, like I'd been doing for months. But inside, something was shifting. Not just resentment, something sharper. A quiet decision forming. I didn't need to fight anymore. I just needed to leave. Every night I started counting down. Not the days to the wedding, but the months left until I turned 18. I'd lie in bed with my headphones on, staring at the ceiling, letting the music drown out the sound of their laughter downstairs. Because that laughter wasn't meant for me. It was a show they put on for each other, for the neighbors, for anyone willing to believe we were one big happy family. But not for me. Sometimes I'd hear Angie talking to her friends on the phone. "The boys are bonding so well," she'd say, her voice soaked in syrup. "I think we're finally getting through to him." And I'd laugh quietly, not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. She didn't even know me, not really. And my dad? He used to check in with me back when it was just the two of us and my sister. He used to care about how I felt, or at least pretend to. But now, he just sat in the passenger seat of this new family Angie was driving. Every once in a while, he'd look at me like he wanted to say something. But he never did. And that silence spoke volumes. The more I held my distance, the more pressure they put on. "You need to start calling her your stepmom. You're setting a bad example for the younger kids. This family only works if everyone's all in." But what they really meant was, this family only works if you give up who you are. They wanted me to fold, to fake it, to play my part. But I couldn't. And deep down, I think they knew it. That's why they kept pushing harder, because they were afraid that I was the one crack they couldn't plaster over. By the end of spring, it wasn't just tension. It was a quiet war. Not with shouting or slammed doors. No, it was the silence at the dinner table, the exchanged glances when I walked into the room, the way Angie would pause mid-sentence when she realized I was listening, and the way my dad would suddenly become very interested in his plate. Every conversation felt loaded, like a minefield wrapped in politeness. "Would you like to join us for game night?" "No, thank you." I'd keep my voice calm, neutral. But inside, I knew they were tallying every refusal, every boundary I kept standing behind. Then came the birthday party. Angie's daughter turned 11, and the house was packed with balloons and sugary decorations. I did what I always do, stayed out of the way. But halfway through the cake cutting, Angie came over, camera in hand, and said, "Come on, let's get a picture with your sister." I blinked. She meant her daughter. And I knew then that it wasn't just a push for titles. It was a rewrite, a restructuring. They weren't building a family. They were building a fantasy. And I was just inconvenient truth. So I smiled for the picture. But I never looked at the camera. Because I wasn't really there. After that photo, something shifted. Not in them. In me. I realized they weren't going to stop. Not with the gentle nudges or awkward sit-downs. They had already decided what this family should look like, and they were just waiting for me to step into the costume they'd picked out, and I wouldn't. I couldn't. The final straw came one Thursday evening. I had a school form that needed signing. Simple enough. So I gave it to Dad, like I always do. But this time, Angie intercepted. "I can sign that," she said, smiling like it was some grand gesture. I shook my head. "I'd prefer if Dad did." She blinked, just once. But behind that blink was a storm, and it came out fast. "I'm tired of being treated like a stranger in my own home," she snapped. "I cook for you, clean for you, support your father. What else do you need to accept me?" I wanted to say, I didn't ask for any of that, but I didn't. I just stood there, silent. My dad took the paper, signed it without a word, and handed it back. Later that night, I heard them arguing behind their door. My name floated through the cracks, followed by words like disrespectful, ungrateful, and resentful. Maybe they were right. But I was also just a kid trying to breathe in a house that kept shrinking around me. The air in the house stayed thick after that night. Meals became quiet. Doors stayed closed. Even the light in the living room seemed dimmer, like the house itself was tired of pretending. Her son, the one who called my dad a loser, he got away with everything. Skipped chores, mouthed off, barely looked up from his phone. But no lectures, no family meetings, just silence. And me? I got watched like a hawk. One eye roll, one smirk, and suddenly I was the threat to unity. Funny how that works. I started keeping to myself. Headphones in, room locked, counting down the days until I turned 18. Freedom had a date now, and I circled it on my calendar in red. The final time they brought it up, I didn't even flinch. "We just want to feel like a real family," Angie said, her voice softer than usual. "We already are one," I replied. "Just not the version you're hoping for." She stared at me, then looked away. Dad said nothing, and that silence told me everything I needed to know.